Hello, and welcome to Controlling the Chaos Hacks. During this session, we're going to be talking about how to control some of maybe your classroom management issues or executive functioning struggles, or even just that one student that might kind of drive you crazy or cause a little chaos in your classroom.
And just to preempt this whole thing, we would like to say these are hacks. We're going to throw a lot of different things at you, a lot of different resources in different categories. You don't have to be overwhelmed by it. Just think about one. If you could take away one thing from this presentation, um, that to implement in your classroom, that's the goal, really. So don't be overwhelmed by the multiple different resources throughout the presentation because we have a whole bunch throwing out there. Sometimes we get a little bit excited, and that's how our brains work. But your brain doesn't have to work that way, and you don't have to be overwhelmed. Just pick one.
Yeah, and your first thing might come right away. So then you're like, oh, I'm done with the PDF. I can come back in a week or two. This video is going to be here for you to review and take away as you're ready to take away those different hacks for your classroom. So first off, let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Stephanie Howe. I'm the instructional technology coach in our district. I work with different teachers on coaching cycles and helping them use technology and blended learning in the classroom. Where Tara,
I am a behavior coach in the district. I work K 12 in 14 different buildings, so I spread a little bit of everywhere. I help teachers put in behavior plans to support our tier 2 and our tier 3 kiddos. I support PBIS teams when they have an FBA and a behavior plan to put in place. I go into classrooms and I model interventions. So I support special education as well with some of their students that have some high level behaviors. And I also help on the tier 1 level and support classroom management so that we can prevent our kids going to tier 2 and tier 3, right?
yeah,
So that
and so Tara and I kind of came together. I had the tech and blended learning side of things, and Tara had that behavior side of things. And what we quickly learned is our students started to struggle with some of these blended learning practices because they needed to take ownership of their learning. They needed to be self-paced. They needed to be motivated, which are all behavior things. And so Tara and I became really good friends this past school year.
Yeah, and we found out, right? Steph has a lot of resources. I have a lot of strategies, but resources don't work without strategies. You can't just take the resource and here you go. You have to have some strategies. And strategies don't work necessarily without some of those resources. So we're working hand in hand.
Yeah, and so right here is the resources for this session. So we will provide that link in the session resources, but also you'll just go to this Google form right here, and I put the bit.ly on the screen. And once you click it, you're just going to fill out your email address, your name, your district, and then the session title. Today's session title is Controlling the Chaos Hacks. And so make sure you put that in. And then after you fill this out, about 24 hours after the session, we're going to email you the links to all of the resources and some additional links if you're interested. So again, hit pause on this video if you need to get that bit.ly. But once you fill out this Google form, in 24 hours, you will receive those resources. We also have a book coming out very soon, or it might already be out by the time you watch this recording. And it is called Control the Chaos. And it's talking about what it takes to create order in the classroom using those executive functioning skills that a lot of our students, even adults, are lacking.
Oh, for sure. I'm excited about that. I can't wait. So let's get started. Our first category is SOPs. Not sure if this is what you call them in your district, but it's standing operating procedures, right? Every company has standing operating procedures. Classrooms have standing operating procedures. The long and short of it is, what does it look like? What is your procedure for turning in work? What is your procedure for lining up at the door? What is your procedure when the bell rings? What is your procedure to transition from activity to activity? Whatever it is, there's a procedure for it, right? When you have these procedures in place and kids have those clear expectations of what it is that they're supposed to do, then it helps your classroom run a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, and so what we kind of did is, again, this is a pack of resources, so it can be really overwhelming when you're looking at this pack. However, think about your own classroom. Think about the struggles that you might have in your own classroom. For some teachers, it's group work. Some teachers are like, I'm a pro at that. Like our students are acing that. They're doing really good. Sometimes it might be transition time where you are wasting maybe instructional time because it's just taking your students so long to get settled, to get out their material, to get actually working on the assignments. Other times it might be when students are stuck, they're just coming up to you and they're asking for support. And you're like, this is driving me crazy. I'm trying to work with a small group. So, again, lots of resources in this pack, but you've got to think about what is the most chaos or chaotic time in that classroom, and how am I going to use these resources to support me? And maybe once you solve one, you have something else come up. So once you get the transitions done, students start asking you those questions, and you're like, okay, what do I do if a student is stuck? Okay, what is my procedure for that? And so having these in place can start to settle some of that chaos in your classroom.
And not every classroom is going to look the same. So, knowing that it's okay to have different standing operating procedures in your classroom than it is in Mrs. Howell's classroom, right? So, just knowing, but setting that expectation is the most important piece early on in the school year so that you can start off creating that routine and that structure for those kiddos. If you find out it's not working, you can always pull it back a little bit. But having that structure to start off is really important in creating that classroom management piece.
And so the first one we're going to look at is this when you're stuck. All of these are very similar in design, but once you go in, they have different resources and strategies. So say, for example, you're stuck, or your students are asking for help and they're really stuck on a different assignment. And so these are just some questions to think about first. And so we just like to kind of use some reflective questions to help you getting on the right kind of mind wave of how these resources can support you. So maybe what questions can I ask to help students figure out? Is there a certain language that I can use to help students problem solve? Am I encouraging students to experiment in the classroom? What are maybe the misconceptions or misunderstandings that multiple students have, and looking at that pattern? And then how will my students ask for help? So once you kind of think through those questions, and again, every single one of these is a little bit different depending on the resource, then it goes into ideas and support to help you with creating your procedure. Again, every teacher is so different. And because of that, some teachers prefer a Google form. Here's an example of a Google form. Once it allows me to make a copy, some teachers like the digital, they can have their screen up, they can be working with a small group. Other teachers cannot do that. And that's perfectly fine. You just have to know how you handle, and it's okay to try things and fail forward. And so this is an example as students would say, I have a question, I need to use the restroom, or I have a technology issue. You can, of course, add more to this list. And then we can ask the students, maybe, what have you tried? Did you ask a friend? Did you rewatch the video? Did you restart your Chromebook? And then they can type their question here. Once they type their question here, you can set up the spreadsheet so that way you can see all of your students' responses coming in, and you're able to highlight them as you meet with them, as you conference with them, or as they get unstuck, or as they use the restroom. You can just kind of say, go to the restroom. You don't need to have them maybe come up and do that. So there's one way. However, again, you might not be a digital person. So maybe you set up like a waiting room using clothespins. And so here's clothespins. Students will grab a clothespin, and then you just kind of say, I'm serving number 1, number 2, 3, 4. And then you're able to conference with those students and answer those questions independently.
And that one's huge too when you have that waiting room and you don't have kids up, getting up and down, trying to ask questions. I love your ask three before me. I'm not sure if that one's on that one's there, right? Ask three before me. That this is huge, right? Like, here's the things when you are stuck, that you have a choice board of ask three before me. You can YouTube it. You can go back to it later. You can put it in a classroom chat or ask a friend. And just having that choice, because what matters is they're trying to problem solve themselves, right? I think that's important itself, that they don't get stuck and immediately want to come to you for help, but they're trying that problem solve of being able to ask three or do three, whatever it is, before you come to me. So that's another procedure that you could put in place, and there's the resource to match it.
Yeah, and so again, there's so many different resources that you can use. We even like to maybe even use like student conferences where maybe on the board and you have an activity and you maybe have like a list of different activities for your students. And you can number those activities so it might be easier for students to communicate which one they need help with. But if you have like 5 students up on the board and they all need help with assignment number 2, you could quickly pull a small group instead of individually answering those questions as well. So think about how you want to organize that in your classroom. And then one way that we like to do this is using common language. So this right here is the check and connect. So maybe we ask them, have you done step 1 where you looked over the video or you did a Google search? Step 2, did you check in with a friend? Step 3, did you connect using that Google form? Again, yours could be completely different. And then step 4, did you connect when the teacher was ready?
I love the common language piece, so that once you teach this standing operating procedure, you're able to just use that language to say, "Hey, did you check and connect?" And you kind of start conditioning that brain to, "Oh, I got to check and connect first." So it's a very simple reminder when you start using that common language and adding that common language to your classroom as well, when you name some of the procedures.
And then this next one is just a rubric. So coming up with that behavior goal that you have for those procedures and checking in with students. Are they meeting that procedure or are they not? And so listing out on a scale of 1 through 4 of how students can really show that they've mastered maybe that behavior skill. So again, if we are dealing with being stuck, have students maybe not reached out to anybody, and so that might be a 1, where maybe they started to reach out to one person, but then they asked you for help. That would maybe be a 2. And then a 3, maybe they did some problem solving, but number 4, they went over and above and they were able to solve their problem by themselves. So again, creating like a rubric and having students self-check maybe every week or every so often can really help also to know if they are meeting those behavior goals and expectations with those procedures. Because with procedures, you have to be consistent. You can't just be one and done. And that was a lot of my mistake. I'm like, I told the kids they had to do this, and then they're not doing it. You need to keep reminding it to build that up, and eventually it becomes natural in your classroom. And then review games. So review games can be another great way to reinforce those SOPs.
And this is one of my favorites because there's so many ways to do this, and it could take 10 minutes. It's super engaging. Kids love games, kids love competition, or it doesn't have to be competition, but there's so many. It could be something as easy as stand up, sit down, or where you have stand up if it's this, sit down if it's this, right? So all they're doing is up and down. Did I say stand up, sit down?
I think so.
Or
Yeah.
did I say stand up, stand up? I'm not sure. Okay. Anyway, but it could be true and false, or it could be a gimp kit or a scoot, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a long game, but just something to engage those kiddos and remind them of what their procedures are, right? We don't teach a reading skill and then never go back and revisit that reading skill. We don't teach a math skill and then never go back and revisit that math skill. We're always kind of using those skills and refreshing those skills, and we continue to teach those skills. But sometimes that's where we get lost in behavior. We think we teach those procedures at the beginning of the year in the first week, and then we teach them in January when they come back from break, or whenever your extended break is, and then we don't have to teach them again. But that's not necessarily true, because there's many different, the way I think of it, and I'll tell a little bit of a personal story right now, is that my kiddos, um, I, I have a divorced family, a split family. So when they were young, this happened at 2 and 3 years old, they had to go back and forth between mom and dad's house. Well, mom and dad's house have different rules. So it took them time. They had to learn what were the rules at mom's house and what were the rules at dad's house. Basically, the standing operating procedures, right? How did it work at mom's, and how did it work at dad's? Eventually they learned what was at one house and not the other, but it took time, it took reminders, and also, when they would go to dad's house for the weekends and then they would come back, it was an adjustment for them to come back. Same thing with school. They go home for the weekend, they come back to school on Monday, and then there's readjusting back to the school standing operating procedures or the school behavioral expectations. So you can have many kiddos that need that adjustment period and that reminder and those review games. It's really good for all kids, but they'll get it if you continue to work at it. If you don't continue to work at it, it's going to take longer. The struggle will be real. You might have a little bit of extra chaos in your classroom.
Yeah, which brings us next to executive functioning. So with executive functioning, we have learned that a lot of our students might struggle because they might lack with some of these different skills. And so how we like to kind of start off with executive functioning is we want you to think about one student in your classroom that you had this past school year or you currently have in your classroom. And once you think about that student, think about a descriptor for that student. Maybe they are lazy. Maybe they're stubborn, messy, disruptive. Maybe they are forgetful or whatever. So think about that descriptor. Now that you've thought about that descriptor for that student, and I always like to use my son, who's very, very stubborn, and he's 2 years old. So I've been working on his executive functioning skills already. Is with that descriptor, because sometimes it's easier to communicate like that student's just so lazy. But what I've realized is when I use that descriptor for that student is I'm kind of saying like that's like a fixed mindset. Like they can't get unlazy. They're just going to be lazy the whole rest of their life. But what happens is when we look at these executive functioning skills, there's actually some skills that are lacking with that student. And when I think about it with skills, I finally am able to think about I can help this student grow and I can give them resources that will help them not be so stubborn. So my 2-year-old son who's stubborn, I can look at this goal directed or maybe work on some flexibility with him. And so that's what I've been doing is I will set different goals with him. Like in 15 minutes, if you do this, this, and this, then you might get some type of reward. Or, hey, our goal is to potty train. So we're going to do this activity. And then just that flexibility, like, hey, we're going to go do this. Just kidding. Like, just going to keep him changed and keep his mind like, oh, sometimes plans change and we can't get upset about it. Which is a hard skill for even adults to learn. So he's just lucky to have me as an educator, I think. But again, looking at these descriptors can sometimes feel like it is fixed. But when we look at it with executive functioning, we feel like we can provide resources or support to help that student not be so messy.
And I think one thing that is important to note in this part, right, is that children are not born with these skills. Children have the ability to develop these skills, which is really important. Typically, executive functioning is related at a higher level to students with ADHD, but this is all kids. They come from different backgrounds, they come from different cultures. Everybody has a different home life. They have different skills that they parents have worked on or not worked on, or model or don't model. So this is for all kids, not just for kids that struggle with ADHD. My story is messy, right? Like at one, when my kids were walking, I was modeling. We would pick up our toys together after we pulled them out, and we would walk them over to the toy box and put them into the toy box together so that I wouldn't have a living room full of toys laying over all over the place. By the time my son was 5 years old, we were labeling his drawers because he wanted to make sure that all of his clothes went in the right drawers when I was helping him put his clothes away. So he was in the very beginning getting that organization piece that I was teaching him through modeling, putting his toys away. My daughter at 5 years old told me, and I guess maybe I taught organization and that piece of it too well. But my daughter told me she wasn't going to school if her clothes were not ironed in kindergarten. You know what I said about that? No, I'm not ironing your clothes in kindergarten.
Yeah.
But that's just an example of students are not born with those skills. You're taught those skills, right? So kids, there are some kids that are never subject to some of these, organization skills that they're taught, and they might have a book bag full of papers. Or we had a student in the 6th grade this year that in May found food in the bottom of his book bag from like August. It was like a science experiment.
It's gross.
Yeah, that is. I mean, who knows? He told us it was August. Maybe it wasn't August because I would think there would be smell, but it is what it is, right? It's still there. It's still green, and it's still a science experiment for however long it was there. But we don't know that student was ever taught those organization skills. So that's when we have to think this is not the messy kid. This is a kid that needs support in organization. And then instead of looking at that descriptor, we're looking at the deficit area and starting to teach those skills, whatever that they are.
Yeah, and so what we decided is because every single student has strengths and weaknesses with their executive functioning, including adults, is we took all of those executive functioning skills and we broke them apart. And we talked about different strategies and maybe some resources to help that student. So maybe we need to set up like a goal getter for that student that needs help with goal setting, where we talk about, okay, we have passed this many lessons and our goal is this for a program or on a test or something like that. Then maybe we create different step-by-step ways to reach a goal. And so all of these different resources are ways that teachers can adapt, customize, and use them in their classroom to help with students. Maybe they need an OK Google Organize My Life resource where they watch a quick video on different skills and then they have a tic-tac-toe board to organize their Google Drive. So a bunch of resources again. But again, you just have to think about that student and what does that one student need to be successful in your classroom?
And now also thinking, I know you touched on that. Okay, Google Organize My Life. That could be for any learning management system that you use that. If you don't have Google in your school and you use some other type of learning management system, digital organization is now a thing, right? Now we're not just worried about organizing our book bags. We're also learning how to organize digitally, how to, look at our emails. I don't know about anybody else, but how many emails do you get in a day if your email is not organized and you're getting all these emails and it's going to the promotions box and you look at your email and it's like, I got 30 new emails today. Like that takes organization and it takes a little time. Some people can handle it and some people can have like 1,000 unopened emails sitting in their promotions box. and some people have to have that box empty. So, looking at that organization, not just organization in the classroom, but organization digitally as well. Because if you're doing a station rotation or a blending learning model and you have to access something from your drive, how are you going to find it very quickly when you have a 2 minute or 3 minute transition time and you need to get started on a document that you have in your drive right away? So that organization will help that transition piece when you're talking about that blended learning model and you're talking about digital organization as well.
For sure. Which brings us to an assessment. So again, you can do a quick assessment of thinking like that student's really lazy, or you can just kind of tell maybe by observation. But there is an assessment that we were able to create with the help of Luis, and he did some sheet magic. I don't even know what he did, but he is amazing. But this assessment that I'm showing right here is for students to take. Usually we say grades 4 and up. If you might have younger students, you might have like a staff member complete the survey for the student or a parent complete it. And so there's a couple different assessments on this page that walk students through. But what happens is with this assessment, students complete, I believe it's around 40 different questions. And what they will do is they will have their executive functioning scores come on a nice spreadsheet, which then we used Autocrat to send students the score. So there's a walkthrough video on how to set this up. We also have the different versions and then how to kind of access the information. And what we were able to do this past school year is once students took this assessment, we were able to group them. We were able to group them by their different strengths and weaknesses. And we had some students who are really organized lead that group. They were able to lead a small group of how they organize and some tips and tricks on what they do to help other students. And so it just became really helpful when we were able to look at all of these different strengths and weaknesses from the students, and we could kind of just quickly tell how they were doing.
And this is also then another way that you can think about grouping, right? We're always thinking about the different ways that we group students. Maybe this could be another way you group students. I have a student that's really struggles with emotional control. Am I going to want to put another student that really struggles with emotional control in the same group so that they feed off of each other, right? So maybe we want to split those students up and put them with really strong students that have emotional control. So that way they have that peer model within their group. So it could be also, again, not just about what do the kids need to work on, but it can support maybe how you group your students when you're doing station rotation, when you're doing different blended learning models within your classroom or different group activities within your classroom.
And what was really cool with this assessment is we gave it in the fall, and then we were able to give it again in the winter, and students' scores improved. And it was just exciting to see how their scores improved. And they actually did a reflection about their scores in the fall to their scores at the end of the year. And they were able to reflect on different activities that helped them, different activities that might have not as helped them as much. And really think about, okay, I was messy, but now I'm organized, and here's why. And so realizing that they could grow in these different areas.
And I'm going to just add a little personal note really quickly on this one. I know that you're thinking, I just don't have time. Like, this is our roadblock. I just don't have time to work on all of this stuff. Finding ways to incorporate it. I mean, it's great to introduce those skills and have like an introduction lesson on these skills. But then once you've done that introduction, just like we do standing operating procedures, being able to review them and kind of add them into your curriculum is where the most gains will come out of it. And my personal story is recently I was at this conference in Cleveland, and I was in a room, and I think I was the only millionaire I was the only person that was not a millionaire. Let me make sure I say that right. In the room, and there was about 300 people. Me and my husband were not the money makers in that room, but we were there to learn nonetheless. Um, and, many of these skills that we see in executive functioning were discussed by the speakers that were in that room. Time management, being able to sustain your attention to like focus on one thing, that emotional control, the stress tolerance when you have a failure and you have to work through it and problem solve with your teams. All of these skills are lifelong skills. And I can tell you, not one person in that room talked about geometry or history, but every single one at least talked about one of these executive functioning skills when they presented. So don't think of it as another thing to do. Think of it as I'm teaching this student a lifelong skill that's going to help them wherever they go.
Yeah, for sure. And then working with parents. So we know that this one can be sometimes difficult to do, but we started to create a resource because parents in our students' newsletters that they sent home were talking about these executive functioning skills. And so because of that, some parents were interested in helping at home, which was really exciting. And so we created like a 3 in a row board where students will go to whatever skill maybe they're working on for the week. And if it's time management, there's different activities that they could do at home. And once they did that activity, they were able to place an X over that box. And once they had 3 in a row, they were able to get some type of reward or some type of prize or extra tech time for completing that activity.
I love that so much. Parent resources are amazing, especially the parents, when they want to help, when they
Mhm.
see that, these things are working or it's something that their kiddo needs support on. Whenever this is a great parent resource that you can provide for families that they can help with it with this at home because sometimes they don't know where to start.
Mhm. Yeah, and not every family did it, but it was just a nice resource to have for parents to kind of say, hey, we're working on goal setting today. Or this week is kind of the focus, or this 2 weeks we're working on this activity. Here's some strategies that you can support us at home. And when parents saw like play a game with their kids, like a lot of executive functioning skills can be hit with just a fun game or exercise for 30 minutes. You go for a walk with your child, and parents were able to kind of have that at home connection with their students as well.
Absolutely. Link it to a newsletter, send it
Mhm.
home, give a little blurb on how to implement it, talk about it, and dive in.
Next up, we've got relationship building. So, again, building relationships not only at the start of the year, but throughout this school year. And these are just some ways that we like to do that. The first one is a forced choice survey. And I love this survey so much that I think everybody should use it. So, if you're overwhelmed, you need to use this one. This is your one thing that you're going to take away from the session. But what I thought when I taught is candy was the answer. Candy was going to motivate my students. It was going to engage my students. They were going to go over and above for candy. And what this survey taught me is that we all are motivated by different things, even our students. And so, what I learned is not all my students were excited about candy as I was. Some of them just wanted that adult approval. They wanted me to give them some detailed feedback, or they wanted me to communicate with them, or provide some independent rewards to them, like tech time or something like that. And so, what this survey does is it walks your students through a spreadsheet. And so, once you have the spreadsheet, you will create a Google form. And it's a quick kind of would you rather Google form. So it just kind of asks them which one would they pick? Would they rather have maybe a teacher writes 100 on their paper, or would they rather have be the first to finish their work? And so again, it's just a fun activity for you to kind of quickly realize what motivates your students. And you can kind of see here real quick is the Google form that goes over the 2 questions. It's 40 questions, but it's just a great way to know what motivates your students. And after that, this nice little form pops up with their scores.
And I wanted to This typically we use like our tier 2, tier 3 behavior kiddos that we are writing a behavior plan for, and we're looking at what's the positive incentive that motivates them. But using this for whole class at the tier 1 level is huge. And then being able to provide some of those, just like we provide choice boards in our work. What's the choice for some of our rewards? Because so many people are motivated by different things. Like Steph said, I'm not motivated by candy whatsoever. I'm not a sweet person. I don't eat ice cream. I don't like, the only candy I eat is Sour Patch Kids. So unless you are giving me Sour Patch Kids, I'm not motivated at all. But I am motivated by competition. I like to win. So give me some competitive rewards, or give me some independent time to be able to work on what I want to work on instead of working on what you want me to work on. That would be motivating to me. So just finding that balance is a huge motivator. And if you know right off the bat that your student is motivated by something, and you have a free Friday for everybody that, or maybe not a free Friday, but a forced choice, reward on Friday for time for students that did X, Y, and Z during the week, and allow them some choice, they're going to be much more motivated by then just saying, um, all the class is going to get tech time, or all the class is going to get art time, because not everybody likes tech, not everybody likes art, not everybody likes reading. So you're motivating each individual student this way.
Yeah. So one thing that I really love is just you're able now to personalize and customize those rewards for your students. And so some students might take a snack break. Other students in your room might be sitting next to a friend for 5 minutes, which makes it just really nice to personalize and customize for your students. And we love to use on a scale. So go ahead and think about, how are you feeling on a scale of sloth today? I think I'm feeling a number 7. I'm feeling pretty good today. What about you, Sarah?
Let me see here. I think that, yeah, I'm feeling like a 2, maybe. Feeling
Oh,
like a
yeah.
2.
Oh, okay. I know there's some ADAs out there as well. I feel like, come on. So, based on a scale, what we like to use is just a quick way to connect with students. And you can make these really, really fun for your classroom. Um, so on this one, there's like a make and take where we created a bunch of these different resources for your classroom. You can have it just up on the board. You could add Pear Deck or Nearpod, and students could add a little dabber for how they're feeling on a scale of squirrel. And they can quickly say, oh, I'm a number 6 today, or I'm number 4. But then you can explain and kind of have a conversation with students about why they might feel that way. Some teachers will add this maybe to a Jamboard, and the students, again, will pick what ducky they're feeling today, or a Google form. And you can even add on your Google form, do you want a teacher check-in? What number are you feeling? And students will pick 1 through 6, and then they explain why they're feeling this way. So many different ways to use this in your classroom.
Yeah, I love it so much. I actually use it. I send it to some coordinators in my building, with being a coach, checking in with them, seeing how they're feeling. It just, sometimes it's a random day. Like I did a random day in September. I did a little check in, see how you're feeling. Is there anything that you need from me? Is there anything that I'm not doing to support you? So it could be the same for students as I am doing for teachers. How are you feeling? Is there anything that you need today? Or you could just use it like you're doing a project, right? How are you feeling about the project? You can throw this up there. How are you feeling about the project? And if you answered this, 2 and 5, what is it that I can do to support you, if this is how you're feeling on a project?
Yeah, so great way to check in with emotions when there might be something new coming up, or when something might have already been in place, you're able to kind of check in with students as well. Which brings us just to getting to know you. So I know maybe back to school, or maybe it's mid-school year for you. And this can be a great way to get to know your students in kind of like a different activity. So students will do all of these activities. They might do that forced choice activity that we talked about earlier, but just having a visual for them can really help when you're trying to assign multiple different things or trying to do different activities. I also like to use personality tests. I am obsessed with personality tests. And so this website right here is Can We Talk EDU, and it talks about the 4 different colors that you could be. I'm a gold. And Tara, have you taken this test yet?
I did a long time ago, and I don't remember what I was. I feel like it's been years. So,
I think you're
um, you think I'm a what?
a green.
What does that mean?
Okay, so once you take this survey, I don't want to give away too much to our people that are tuning in, but once you take this survey, you're able to provide feedback to your students a lot better. So golds are kind of your students that need order. They're rule followers. They're very like true, like they're going to get stuff done. They're the students that are going to turn things in ahead of time. And when you're giving them feedback, you need to be very detailed. You also want to maybe provide structures. If you said something, they're going to remember every single word you said. And so you can't change your rubric. You need to be consistent and you need to say, yes, that's true. Now, Tara, who I think is a green, she has to question and think about everything. She needs to analyze, she needs to look up on research whether or not something is true, which is totally true, because she'll be like, "Oh, I'm looking at this website," and I'm like, "Yeah, I told you the website's going to say this." But when I give feedback to Tara, it needs to be through questions. I can't just say like, "Oh, this is great." I need to ask her like, "What were you thinking when you did this?" or "Why did you put that instead of this?" Like you need to use questions with your green type of students. You need to have that clear purpose and having maybe them share back that information with you, so it's more of a conversation. Your blues in your classroom, they might be a little bit more relationship. They're more emotional. So these students love the social aspect of school. These students need check-ins, so they want to make sure that when you're doing those maybe on a scale check-ins and asking them, how are you feeling about this project? Also, they want that feedback sandwich of something positive, the maybe negative feedback, and then the positive again. And they need that relationship. So if they don't have a relationship with you, it's going to be hard to see change in their work because they want to know that you do care. And then there's the oranges. Oranges are the fun students in your classroom. They're very creative. They're very competitive. These are the students that make me kind of mad because as a gold, I did all the work to prepare the presentation, and the oranges can just get up and present it like amazing. They had no maybe prep work in the presentation, but they can get up and wing this presentation and they can do an amazing job. So Stephanie Rothstein, she created this resource of different assessments that you can use to find out the colors and a video resources that goes over the colors in more detail. But it's just a great way to get to know your students quickly and then provide them the feedback that they need and building relationships with them to kind of understand them as a person.
I am absolutely a green behavior analyst. Like it's right. Like that's what I do. I analyze
Uh-huh.
behavior graphs. The doctors, they asked me to use my graph to share with other patients at the James Cancer Hospital because I graphed my drain output and had my level of activity on there. I literally analyze everything.
Yeah, I'm not shocked. But yeah, it just kind of helps once you do know their personality that Tara's going to do that. She needs to research and she needs to know the why we're going to learn something in the classroom. She can't just do it like a gold or something else. Like she's got to have research to back it.
but I could be a cross with an orange too, because
Yeah, they're
I
fun.
never wing like, or I never plan presentations. I wing everything,
Yeah,
right? Like we
that's what
never
you
write
just
down
can't
a
do it.
script or anything. So
Yeah.
what does green and orange make together when you add them together?
Um, Usually you'll have a high score and then like a second score that's high too. So I think you're really high in green and then orange would be your second. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you are a mixture of both.
I'm a mixed breed.
You are, you are. And then what students can do is they can choose one of these activities here just to get to know them a little bit more. I've learned that students love to create. And so just allowing them to create like a poster with Canva or to show some things. And what I've learned is you learn a lot about a student when they are just given a blank canvas and they can design and they can add their sports, their favorite quote, and then you can talk about it with the students. I also like to use Number Mania. Number Mania is a fun way to get to know people as well, where they add just 5 different numbers. So really quickly you learn that I go to bed at 8 p.m. So really quickly you learn that new fact about me. And students just have to share one fact. If they want to share all of them, they can. But it's just a fun way to share information about students. And then maybe you have students pick a classroom job and start to build your classroom economy as well.
Relationship building. So going back to the beginning, the one thing I like to talk about is we wrote a blog article about this relationship capital. Think about it as a bank, okay? If you put money in the bank and then you go to take money out of the bank, it's going to be there, right? If you add money into that bank, you add money into that relationship, you'll have money to take out when it's time, when you need to give that student feedback, when you need to do something, you need to correct that student because you have it there. But once the money in the bank runs out and then you go to correct and then you go to give feedback, there's nothing there. You go into the negative. Then you get charged $35 by the bank or something crazy like that. I don't even know what it is. But then you even go more into the negative. So you're not reaching that student anymore because you're going down into the negative. So you make the deposits into the bank with that relationship, but you have to keep making those deposits into the bank. You have to keep finding ways to deposit into the bank. So every time you need to withdraw from the bank, the money is there. Because one deposit won't make the whole year, right? Like we'll spend that money quickly when you're given feedback, corrections, whatever it is within the classroom. So keep making your deposits throughout the year. Don't just build that relationship capital, but maintain it. Maintain the bank account. Keep putting money in so whenever you need to take money out, you can. And at the end of the year, you didn't have to take out much. You have this really strong bank account, right, that you have built that could be something that could last a lifetime with a student.
So transitions are next, and transitions can be really difficult for some students. So when we're looking at transitions, it might just be helpful to have an agenda. So having an agenda up on your board for students to just kind of see what is happening today. And I know when I taught summer school this past school year, I had some students that were like, what are we doing today? I'm like, it's on the board. Like I have an agenda, but it just kind of helps them wrap their mind around, okay, what is the plan for the school day? What am I expected to do? And when am I expected to get it done?
And I love when we worked on some agendas, and I think it's end of the day agendas, beginning of the day agendas, but adding those expectations in as well when you add those expectations, and let students know like this is what your voice level needs to be at. You need to be at a voice level 1. You need to have your materials X, Y, and Z ready to go. But having those expectations there as well, not just making it a to do list, but also what are my expectations for when I'm completing that. is also a great thing to add to your agenda, so students know what those standing operating procedures are when they enter the room, and they're provided that visual reminder of it.
Yeah, it can just be super helpful for you to quickly even change the icons off to the side. Like instead of crowns today, we need our notebooks. And you can just quickly change in and out those different materials. You can change the voice levels. And students are able to meet those expectations because it's been set for them. It's not a surprise when you're yelling at them 5 minutes into the activity. They know exactly how they're supposed to behave. And you might just need to set a reminder instead of just, what is going on?
And we often think of agendas as being something you do when you walk into the room. But we also have some templates that we created and worked on together that are agendas for when you're leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Like that last piece of the classroom where sometimes we're excited to go home, we're excited to leave to the next class, we start getting awry, like a little bit of chaos starts to happen when we're transitioning from the next activity. But our PM agendas as well are a great resource to have when you're leaving the classroom and you're talking about transitioning into the next class.
Which brings us to the Wonder Wall. This is another kind of way that you can use agendas in your classroom. It talks about John Hattie's 3 questions for visible learning. So what are we learning? Why are we learning it? And when will I know that I've learned it? So again, students have a clear learning objective for the week of what they are to learn. And then you're able to break it down into each of the different days of how students will be learning it. So maybe example is students are going to be creating like a book trailer. They're working on plot. Why are they learning it? Because they need to be able to explain plot to another group of students, and we want them to work on some video editing skills as well. And then when do they know that they've learned it? They have a completed book trailer video that is 1 minute long. And then I can break it up. So on Monday, we are going to brainstorm. We are going to do this on paper. On Tuesday, we're going to learn video. You're going to get a teacher's check on your brainstorm. And then if it's good, you're going to go on and start editing. On Wednesday, you're going to edit. On Thursday, you're going to edit and turn it in. On Friday, we're going to do a gallery walk. Students know exactly when that assignment is due, and they know exactly what is expected by the end of the week for them. So it just can be a helpful way to reinforce what is expected for students to learn when they're in your classroom.
And that one is a great one, right? Because that, like, we always look at our week ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it just helps to know too, to chunk down like a big project. Where I remember when I was maybe in school, a teacher gave me a writing assignment and I felt overwhelmed because they were like, your writing assignment is due on Friday. And I'm like, but I don't know where to start. So just saying like, okay, Monday we're working on the introduction, Tuesday we're doing this, Thursday when, and so on. And then by the end of the week it is due. That can really help with some executive functioning skills as well.
So tidy up your transitions. What does this look like? Setting a timer and practicing those transitions. Super important in blended learning when you're transitioning from station to station. If that's the motto that you're using in your classroom, like getting ready to go to the next station. I know I need my computer. I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I need to do it in this amount of time. A lot of students, they get up, they need to sharpen their pencil, or they need to grab something they forgot, or they need to grab a different supply, or they're not finished with the activity that they want to be finished with. So setting that timer and practicing those transitions and just continuing to try to beat that timer throughout the day. Maybe transition 1, it could be with all in a class, or it could be in a week, right? Transition 1 maybe was Monday, transition 2, and each day we try to get those students better and better. Or maybe we have a 5-station rotation within the classroom, and each transition we're trying to get better and better because we eventually want to get to a 6th station in the classroom. So if we have less time in those transitions, then we can maybe accomplish that later down the line in the block of time that we have.
And then you can also add in some roadblocks. So again, if you're working on flexibility with your students, maybe they need to fill up their water bottle. Maybe they need to use the restroom, and they need to, again, be there by a certain time. But they have these roadblocks in place that might add an extra obstacle or roadblock in their way. Which brings us to reflection. So reflection is a great way to help students. And I love how Tara explains this because I use this strategy with my own son. When it comes to reflection, I think about how can I maybe be proactive rather than him constantly reacting to different situations. So, for example, my son has a really hard time with transitions or letting people leave or going to the next activity. And so, rather than just yelling at him and yelling at him and yelling at him over time of don't do that, we don't do that, we don't do that, I have a conversation with him. And yeah, he's 2, but it helps. And so I can kind of say, well, what do we do when somebody needs to leave? Do we sit and cry and yell, or do we say goodbye, open the garage door, let them out, and then maybe we go to the window and we can watch their car leave? So we have that conversation, and it really has helped when people are leaving or we're having those different transitions. It does take longer to have that conversation with him at first, but now I'm not having that conversation every single time somebody has to leave the house.
We don't want to use reflection just as that reactive piece of it, right? Like we want to talk through it and then use it as a teaching piece. Okay, so this happened this time. This is what, this is what the feedback is from this time. But next time, this is what I can do. And this is what I can practice. And then you can even practice it. Like, okay, so next time when you get upset, in order to calm down, you can take a couple deep breaths. Maybe put your head down for a second. So how about we practice taking those deep breaths? So this brings us to restorative reflections. There's quite a few reflections here, and they're for different things. One of them is a written reflection in a Google form that we might use as a grade check. And I use this for high school kiddos. At the end of every week, they use this grade check reflection. And it's amazing because they think about, okay, what was my missing work? Why did I not get it finished? And then once I figure out why I didn't get finished, what can I do better next week to help make sure that I don't have any missing work to do? So it does have a few subsections, but it goes through each of the core content areas for students that are in high school or in junior high. So it helps them think about each subject. What do I have missing, and what do I need to get done?
Yeah, and so just having these reflections can, again, really help to start to track, see patterns for you as a teacher. There's missing homework ones. There are maybe a class refocus plan. These refocus ones are really helpful as well when students are not paying attention, or they're off task, or they're causing some issues in your classroom. They can just quickly fill out this Google slide, or they can have a printed copy, and they can think about, I was asked to refocus because instead I could have done this, and in the future I'm going to do this. And for students that might need the support, there are like sentence starters or sentences for them that they can just kind of circle as they're kind of thinking about, okay, well, I was talking. That's why I was asked to fill out this refocus form. I should have probably asked for a break, where in the future I'm going to ask for a break instead of acting out or talking. So again, students are able to fill this out. You can keep this in a binder and kind of track. And then maybe after so many times, you can reach out to the parent if needed, or you can start to create a plan with that student.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's great for tracking patterns for students. If you see, that they are struggling to focus every day in math, and we're always needing to fill out these refocus forms in math, is it that they're struggling with the math, or is it the time of day? maybe that they're getting hungry, or they always have to go to the restroom. So, what is that pattern that's causing them to become unfocused at that time? So, then you can work on solving the problem once you've identified it through some of this.
And then work and reset. This is one of our favorite activities to use in the classroom. And what happens is you come up with 2 behavior goals. We suggest probably just 2, no more than 2, just so students have a clear focus. So for this class, their 2 goals was to raise their hand to speak because they were just speaking out whenever they wanted to. They were interrupting me when I was teaching, or they were talking to a friend. So again, whenever they needed to speak, they needed to raise their hand. And then they needed to stay in their space was another thing. They were able to get 1 warning. So if they did do one of those activities, they got 1 warning. And then what happened is we set a timer for 25 minutes, and the students worked. If they worked, then they were able to get one of these behavior goals that was kind of rewarding for them after that time limit.
The important piece of work and reset is, right, we're giving that brain time to reset, because we don't have that sustained attention, right? It's really hard to sit in a room for 60 minutes or 45 minutes. And when you think about this one, is kind of an example for our younger age group, their attention span is even shorter. I used this in high school. I did not use all of these pretty items in this big choice board. I narrowed it down to 2 because what they were really motivated by was their phones. We did a test once, and we wanted to see how many notifications they got that they were distracted by within a class period. And there was 100, we did tally marks, 187 Snapchat notifications within a period between the students. Tell me how distracting that is, and how difficult that is for students to work when they're getting that many notifications throughout. And I think it was like 22 students that we had in the class at that period of time. So that's a lot of notifications. So what we did is we turned over our phones, we put the phones at the top of our desk, and for 20 minutes, they had to give undivided attention to the lesson and to the teacher at the front of the room. And at the end of that 20 minutes, if nobody touched their phone, well, if whoever didn't touch their phone would receive 5 minutes of time to either get on their technology, whatever it was, or to get on their phone. Those were their 2 options. And when it first happened, there were multiple people that did not get it, of course, because they touched their phone. They were distracted. They couldn't put down their notifications, right? And during that reset time, if you don't meet that success criteria that you set, then that's the time that you reflect with the teacher. So the kids that got it were able to have their free tech time and sit on their phone for 5 minutes. The kids that didn't have it had a reflection time for me. And Stephanie has some questions here that she worked through. Stephanie, do you want to look at what some of those reflection questions were?
Yeah, so I just pulled the small group, and I had 2 students that had to come meet with me. And I just asked them, what was a challenge during this work time? And they were saying like, oh, I had to get up to do this. And I talked about, well, you have to wait to do that or ask for permission. And so we were able to talk about that challenge and why they had to feel that they had to get up right at that moment. And then number 2, what went well during that time. And so we talked about, hey, you did not speak up. Or when I gave you that reminder, you were good for another 5 minutes. But then again, you got up again to do that activity. Number 3, how can maybe I help you? Can I give you more reminders? Can I sit you somewhere else? Can I say before we get started with the lesson, do you have all your material? Can I provide a slide with what is needed for the day? What can I do to support you and help you be able to meet these 2 behavior goals? And then what can you try next time to meet the goals? And so we talked, maybe I come over and I say, hey, you're doing a great job at every 5 minutes or so. So I was able to kind of maybe use that timer to help me remind me, say, oh, hey, you have not needed a warning. Great job. And I was able just to go over to that student and tell them. And then we were able to do the reset again. So then we started the timer over and they were able to go through the 2 behavior goals and work on their same thing as well.
I think this is huge. I mean, I know when I did
Mhm.
this with the higher grade levels, one of the things was there was actually a student that said, "Can you hang on to my phone because if it's sitting there, I'll pick it up."
Yeah.
And they realized what their own distraction was. And then when they, you hand back their phone, at the end of the 20 minutes, um, that it's much more valuable to them because there's nothing more motivating than a phone to kids in high school right now when you really think about it. But thinking about that, right, with that whole work and reset in mind, kids will, the roadblock is teachers will think I'm going to lose too much instruction time. But
Mhm.
really, you gain instruction time because you gain that undivided attention. When we timed it out and we did it without the work and reset and with the work and reset, we gained 12 more minutes of instruction time per week. And I know that doesn't seem a lot, but add those weeks up over this or minutes up over the school year, you're actually gaining a lot of instruction time by implementing this strategy, even though you're working and then giving a break because you're getting that undivided attention without distractions in the room.
Yeah, for sure. And then we just want to say thank you for attending this session. And hopefully, you took away at least one way that you are going to maybe control your classroom this year with one of those hacks. And again, we know it was a lot of different resources, but you are able to go back in, rewatch the session. And take away more throughout the school year. So, this is going to be an ongoing video resource for you to come back at any time you're ready to pick up another tip or trick.
And follow that Google form, fill out that Google
Mhm.
form link, and you will absolutely get all of these resources. So if there was one that you wanted to pick out, it'll be sent to you. Or if there's multiples you want to pick out, it'll be sent to you, and you'll have it there at your fingertips so that you don't have to recreate the wheel. So until next time, control the chaos.